My name is Charles Johnson. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma on September 30th, 1942. My father is Alex O. Johnson, Alexander Oliver Johnson, and my mother was Eula Ann Hudspeth Johnson. Well, my father had a hardware business, among other things. He worked during World War II, he worked in the aircraft industry in Tulsa. That's when I was born. And my mother did banking work. She worked for different banks as a teller and clerk. And so they were employed early on in their marriage. They were employed by various businesses. But later on, they both ran the hardware store that they bought. My father was a locksmith and did a lot of lock work, and he'd bid on jobs for hardware. I attended Fayetteville public schools, and I started in September of 1948. And I first started at Jefferson School, was there for half a year, and then went to Leverett Elementary School, and then to junior high and high school in Fayetteville.
So tell me about, what did you do after you got out of high school? What was next?
Well, I attended the university and got a degree in economics from the university, and played 1 year of varsity baseball while I was there. And after college, I worked for an engineering firm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that designed and made industrial air conditioning systems. And then I moved, I came back to Fayetteville and Washington County after that time, and interviewed and was hired by the Economic Opportunity Agency to be the new Neighborhood Youth Corps coordinator, director. And it's a program to work with young people, disadvantaged, or young people living in poverty, to learn good work habits and to seek employment. And then I was hired by the board to be executive director when the director resigned in 1969. And then from 69 through 70, most of 78, well, through a portion of 78 at least, to be executive director of the Economic Opportunity Agency. And I did that until I ran for county judge, probably, I think, first maybe in March of 1978 was when I announced for the office.
So give us some background here. Why would you decide to run for county judge? Give some of the background.
Well, I thought there were some things going on in the county that weren't just the way they should be, and I was given strong encouragement by friends and people that I'd gotten to know, and I knew quite a few people because of the length of time that I'd lived in the county. And so I thought it was a place where I could do some good and help people and help the county improve in many of its things.
Talk about your first campaign. Who'd you run against, and what was the campaign like?
My first campaign, I ran It was in 1978, as I mentioned, and I had three primary opponents for the office, the Democratic nominee for county judge, and I won that election without a runoff. And then I ran in the general election against Judge Val Lester, the incumbent, and I was fortunate to win, and that started me on a 20-year career with the county. I ran 10 times. I had a challenger 9 times. So practically every time, all but one, I believe it was 1996, I didn't have an opponent in the general election. But I ran, I think, 11 different campaigns, counting those for sales tax and millages. So I was involved in 11 or 12 campaigns.
Talk about what it was like when you first got in. What kind of a team did you bring in, and what were your issues you were facing?
Well, I of course wanted to hire the best people I could, and people who I thought had the experience and background to do a good job. And I had my chief assistant was Roger Haney, and he had experience as a school administrator and an aide to Governor Pryor. And then for the road department, which was our biggest department of county government, hired Jim Brink to be road superintendent. Jim had a good background and was a very hard worker and understood the issues of road improvement and bridge building. And so I was fortunate there. Bill DeVault was hired as his assistant, and he was very effective at working with representatives of different companies that had products that the county used for road work and equipment, that sort of thing.
What was your office like? Where were your facilities, and what kind of a staff did you have?
We were in our office was in the old courthouse on the second floor, which is the main floor coming in from the front of the building. And I had a staff. The county judge, one responsibility is to staff the various offices that aren't under the authority of specifically elected office holders. And so we had to staff the emergency services operation. Bud Allen was director of that. Work with the various office holders to help them and provide the things they needed to run their offices efficiently.
Who were some of the elected officials that you remember from when you first got in?
When I first got in, Sue Phillips was she ran. I don't recall now whether she was in office or ran for the first time. She may have run. I guess she ran for the first time when I did. Sue Phillips. Herb Marshall was sheriff, and Joe Moon ran and was elected county collector. Marilyn Edwards was the county clerk and had been for 3 or 4 terms at least. Ruth Roberts and Alma Comar was circuit clerk. Malin Gibson was prosecuting attorney.
What was Malin like as prosecutor?
Well, he was a very forthright, hard-working prosecutor. honest, and good person to work with.
What were your challenges going into the office? What were you having to face? I know there had been some challenges with the last administration, but what were you facing going in?
Well, we had the year that I took office was a very bad year weather-wise, and there was a lot of moisture and freezing and thawing of rural roads and rutting, and it was a pretty difficult year to get things lined up and moving ahead and improving the roads that were special problems. And but we tried to put material, get as much material, gravel material on the roads, and set some roads up for surfacing. And that was the challenge facing us.
Talk about some of the, you mentioned some of them earlier, but talk about some of the people that worked for you over the years.
Well, Jim Brink, I mentioned, had been, he had been promoted to road superintendent shortly before I took office. And he was, I found him to be very dedicated and knowledgeable, and so I didn't feel like he ought to be replaced. And the road department employees, by and large, were very good and were interested in doing their jobs and being as effective as they could be. And so we were fortunate there, because there's a lot of different things, tasks that have to be dealt with in a road program.
Talk about, you were in the old courthouse then, I guess. Where was your office and what was it like?
Well, we were in the old courthouse, and it was on the main floor, which was the second floor, the floor that you entered in if you came up the front steps. And our office was to the right, and the county clerk's office was next to it. County Circuit Clerk Alma Kohlmeyer, her office was across the lobby. And then Sue Phillips and Joanne Perry was treasurer. Their offices were down in on the first floor, basement floor. And so we didn't have the best, greatest facilities, and we were kind of crowded, but people do the best they could, and so it worked out pretty well.
You were in a long time, Judge, 20 years. What kind of changes did you see over the years, if you can recall? What were some of the things that changed, and how did you address it?
Well, one thing, it was when we first started computerizing county government, and they were big, large-size computers, chest size, but it did make it more efficient in some of the areas where they were most suited, tax collection and the clerk's offices, cases, and those kinds of things. That was one thing. Of course, things were changing fast, and we had a very small jail, and it's the county judge's responsibility to provide for the jail. And so we were under lawsuit some for the crowded conditions in our jail. And so there was quite a bit of time spent trying to determine what's the best way to go for a jail, and a bigger jail. And we finally wound up built one that was 55 beds, nearly, it was about double what the previous jail had been, but we found out before long far too small for county's needs. Solid waste was always a problem, and of course there was a controversy over the ambulance service. The Washington Regional Hospital had the ambulance service based there at the hospital, and they wanted to get rid of it, and so they announced that they were not going to continue to provide the service. And so then you had Central EMS formed, and West Washington County EMS, and there was considerable controversy and difficulty between the two firms on disagreeing as to territory and that sort of thing. So those were some of the big issues that we dealt with.
Talk about the different public officials, like for the different sheriffs you dealt with over 20 years. Who were they and what were they like?
Well, Sheriff Bill Long was in office. He had been sheriff for seeming maybe 3 or 4 terms, and then Herb Marshall ran against him and was elected, and he was the lone Republican office holder for a time. And then after Sheriff Marshall, he was defeated. First time he defeated Bud Dennis for the office, and then a second time Bud Dennis defeated him for sheriff. So I worked with the two of them, and then later Kenneth McKee was elected sheriff, and I served a few terms with him.
What about your county attorney? Who was your county attorney when you first started, and then who was it later?
Well, at first we had Ginger Crisp was served as part-time county attorney. Used her own office, but she was county attorney for a time, and then George Butler, he became county attorney, and both of them were good to work with, and they were quick getting their opinions out and assisting on legal matters, and so that was a good situation for us. And then later George became full-time county attorney. Then the workload got to be such that he had to. So,
tell a little bit about what he was like. What was George like?
Well, he was mild-mannered, easy to work with. He was very helpful, and when you needed something from him in the way of a legal matter, he was right there to assist and to provide you his best opinion as to what we were facing.
Talk about your quorum court. Who was on the court when you first started, and who were some of the more memorable members? If you don't have to list them all, but
yeah, well,
some of the ones that stand out.
We had 13. The quorum court consisted of 13 members, and we had Lloyd Swope from Lincoln, Jerry Henshaw from Tawnytown area was a very good big contributor. Jack Glaze was a member of the Quorum Court. They were both Republican members. Although partisan politics never really got involved in county matters at all. They were dedicated people, some having more, who might have more conservative opinion than others, or might be a little more knowledgeable about a given field. Peg Anderson was a very effective and good Quorum Court member. Peggy Frizzell, Trieber was a member, and they were both hard workers and got very involved in local government. J.C. Cantrell, Joe Cantrell was represented the West Fork area, and I served with so many, it's sometimes hard to remember exactly who came first, but Wilson Kimbrough and Lyle Thompson were representatives from the Fayetteville area. Bennett Brogdon and was from Springdale, and he may seem like he maybe came in during my second term. He was elected, but those were some of the Quorum Court members. I'd have to get me a list, and I could speak to them, but.
Tell me about Jessie Bryant. What was she like?
Jessie was very interested in helping her community any way she could, helping the Fayetteville community. She was instrumental over time in the founding of the community health clinic that served citizens of Fayetteville. She was just a very dedicated public servant, and people respected her opinions a great deal.
One of the JPs that we've interviewed was Butch Pond, and he said that you actually appointed him to some type of committee.
Butch, yes, and I don't recall now what committee it was.
He said something about roads.
Probably, yeah. That would make that. I don't recall the specifics, but Butch was someone that showed a great deal of interest in county government and in the services that rural people were accessible to. And so I've looked to try to find the best people for the boards that I appointed, committees. He may have helped out on one of the road where we had a dispute over right-of-way, and where there had to be viewers appointed to look at the situation, and I could believe that I appointed him to some of that, one of those or more.
When you decided to retire from office, what were the challenges that faced the county judge at that time? What challenges were you facing, and then your successor? What were the big ones?
Well, we just my last year in office, or the last year or two, we worked to secure the property that now has the jail and juvenile services, and having enough space and enough area for the county to provide the services expected of it was a challenge, and we were able to purchase that property before. It was a good block. Seemed like it was 20 acres or 40. That's provided space for future development and meeting the needs of the counties.
What were some of the issues before the court maybe that stand out? You've mentioned some, but what were some of
Well, we millage levels that the county had to levy, and the cities, and we had to work together on those. And the quorum court approved the millage levies, but we also had to have a special millage to purchase the new courthouse. And so acquiring the facilities that were needed by the county was something that took considerable time and study and communication to the people of the county as to what the needs were. And so we were able to get new courthouse, new county extension office, and a new health department during my terms. And that they were in, all of those were in need of more space and were very crowded, and provided important services to the county.
What other topics or things that maybe you could tell me about that I haven't thought to ask about? What are some of the other things that stand out in your mind?
We've covered pretty well what the things that that the county has to deal with. I think being accessible to the people of the county, it was not unusual for people just to drop in and say you need to talk to the judge. And I tried to be accessible to those people, and I tried to return all my phone calls and to make sure that people had their concerns listened to. But that was, I think, a big plus to be able to do that. And we couldn't always satisfy everyone or make everyone happy, but we tried and tried to provide the best service we could. And I think that open door policy is something all elected officials could benefit from, and I think it exists in Washington County quite a bit. And so it did then. And so.
What about your successors? How did it...
Well, they were effective, I think. Jerry Hunt, the successors to my office, Jerry Hunton was the first one to serve after I did. And he served for 10 years, I believe. And then Marilyn Edwards served, I believe, 3 terms. And she did an effective job. And then now it's in different, and I'm not familiar with the current officials that much, but I think there's a lot of work to be done, and the county judge and all the county officials need to be attuned to the needs of the residents and try to work with them any way they can. We had committees, like Butch Pond mentioned. We appointed committees to help work on various problems that the county faced. And
talk about some of the officials that you got to know from the state. For example, Bill Clinton as governor.
Yes, the state officials had an opportunity, the privilege of working with Governor Clinton. First governor that I worked with, however, was Governor prior, Joe his name escapes me right now, Joe Purcell. He had been, Governor Pryor resigned to go into the, early to go into the Senate, and Joe Purcell was the lieutenant governor, and he was the first one I worked with, first governor that I worked with, because we had some severe road problems due to the weather primarily, and he was very helpful, and we had some help from the National Guard that he called out for help that counties were needing because of the severe weather conditions and effects that they had on the road systems. So I didn't work with too many other officials. It was mainly the governor, but because they were administrative and handled things at the state level the way county judges did at the county level.
If someone who had never been to Washington County came to you and said, Judge, tell me about your home county of Washington County, what would you tell them about Washington County?
I'd tell them it's a very beautiful county, a very good county to live in and to raise a family, and that it's a very forward-looking county. It deals with a lot of issues that before other governments might. It's always been a leader in education or matters of that sort, and as a result, the University of Arkansas is here, which provides services and resources for the county and cities that are fortunate enough to be in Washington County. The cities are all progressive and try to be in the forefront of development and providing services that are needed. So it's just a great place to live.
How would you finish this sentence? My favorite thing about Washington County is
the people and the manner in which it's been handling its growth, and I think it's really done a good job of expanding areas where it needed to, providing services, addressing the needs of the residents of the county, as you might see from the improvement in facilities and the progress that's been made in funding local governments.